The Miami air clung heavy to Elena Morales as she stepped out of the clinic, scrubs damp against her back. The neon glow from a convenience store across the street flickered against her tired face, painting her skin in alternating bands of light and shadow. She exhaled slowly, as if the whole day had been lodged in her chest, refusing to let go. Nursing wasn't supposed to feel like this, like dragging chains with every patient chart. It used to give her purpose, but lately the antiseptic smell of the halls clung to her even after showering, a reminder that her life belonged to fluorescent lights and endless demands. She clutched her purse close and walked toward the bus stop. Her car repossessed months ago. Bills weighed heavier than the tote of medical notes slung across her shoulder. Rent due in 3 days. The electricity bill she kept pushing to the bottom of the pile. A dozen late notices in her mailbox, each, one screaming louder than the last. And then there was the darker burden, the one no one could see. The poker tables, the ringing machines, the desperate gamble that always promised release but delivered only deeper ruin. Just one win away, she whispered under her breath, repeating the mantra that had long ago stopped being true. The bus screeched to a halt, coughing out hot air. She boarded, slid into a cracked vinyl seat, and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Outside, Miami pulsed, neon clubs, street vendors frying empanadas, music spilling out of passing cars. To anyone else, the city looked alive. To Elena, it looked like temptation wrapped in false light. Her phone buzzed. A message from the payday lender. Final notice. Immediate payment required. She turned the screen face down, shame tightening her chest. By the time she reached her apartment, her legs ached from more than just fatigue. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and froze. The quiet was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the fridge. She tossed her bag onto the counter, where unopened envelopes were stacked like a jury waiting for her plea. She pulled off her scrub top, the fabric sticking to her skin, and let it fall onto the couch. In the bathroom mirror, her reflection stared back, dark circles under her eyes, the faint tremor in her hands. She touched her cheek, half expecting the woman in the glass to recoil. "Tomorrow will be better," she muttered, but her voice carried no conviction. She filled a glass with water and sat at the table, flipping one envelope open at last. Overdue balance. Service termination pending. She closed her eyes. Images of green, felt tables and stacks of chips rushed forward like ghosts of past sins. The craving swelled inside her, that familiar hunger that whispered she could erase it, all with one night, one game. But she wasn't alone in carrying secrets. At the clinic that day, she had caught Dr. Marcus Klein's eyes lingering longer than usual. He wasn't smiling, not exactly. His gaze held something heavier, probing, like he knew more than he should. He had paused by her station, fingers tapping against a chart. "You've been distracted, Elena," he had said, tone deceptively casual. "Make sure your outside life doesn't interfere with patient care." The way he let the words hang made her stomach twist. It wasn't just advice, it was a warning, or maybe a hint that he already saw cracks in her facade. She remembered how his lips curved, almost pleased, before he walked away. Now sitting alone in her apartment, those words replayed in her head. Distracted, outside life. Did he know? She pushed the thought away, but it clung stubbornly. If Klein ever discovered the truth, her career would be finished. And with it, the fragile scaffolding that held the rest of her life together. Elena glanced at the clock. Midnight. Sleep wouldn't come. She grabbed her jacket and purse. Somewhere downtown, cards would be shuffling, dice rolling, promises glittering. Somewhere, there was a chance. Slim, dangerous, but still a chance, to buy herself more time. She locked the door behind her, unaware that each step toward temptation was also a step deeper into the trap Klein had already begun to weave. The streets of Miami at night pulsed with a rhythm Elena both craved and feared. Neon spilled across damp sidewalks, laughter rose. From bars and taxis honked impatiently as the city throbbed with restless energy. She pulled her jacket tighter, not against cold. Miami rarely offered that. but against the guilt gnawing beneath her ribs. Her feet carried her as if on autopilot, away from the quiet of her apartment and toward the back streets near Little Havana. Here, signs were dimmer, doors unmarked. She stopped in front of a metal door with a tiny camera perched above it. One sharp knock, then two softer ones. The lock buzzed and she slipped inside. The basement smelled of sweat, whiskey, and desperation. Poker tables stretched across the dim room, their green felt surfaces scarred with cigarette burns. A haze of smoke hovered like a low cloud. The sharp clink of chips punctuated the air, mingled with bursts of laughter and muffled curses. Elena's pulse quickened. For a moment, the exhaustion of her shift, the pile of bills, even Klein's unsettling gaze, everything dissolved into background noise. Here, she was someone else. Not Nurse Morales, not the dutiful professional. Just another desperate player. Chasing the rush, she slid into an empty chair at a table already mid-game. The dealer glanced up, nodded, and began shuffling. "Buy-in?" he asked. "500, Elena replied, her voice steady, though her stomach tightened. She handed over the last of her cash for the week. Stacks of plastic chips replaced the crumpled bills, transforming failure into potential. The cards were dealt. Elena's fingers trembled slightly as she lifted them, a pair of queens. Her heart leapt. Maybe tonight would be different. Hours blurred. Cards, bets, folded hands, fleeting triumphs that crashed into crushing losses. The pile of chips dwindled, rebuilt, dwindled again. Sweat dampened her hairline. Every hand was a chance to crawl out of the hole, or dig deeper. Across the table, a heavy-set man with gold rings watched her closely. His smirk was knowing, almost cruel, as though he'd seen countless Elenas before, players who believed they were one hand away from redemption. "You look tired, sweetheart," he drawled after one brutal loss. "Sure you're not gambling?" "With rent money?" The table chuckled. Elena forced a smile, though her throat burned. "Don't worry about me," she said. "Worry about your own stack." But the sting of truth lingered. By dawn, the table was merciless. Elena's chips were gone, scattered into the hands of strangers. She stood, her legs unsteady, head buzzing with shame. The basement felt smaller, now suffocating, its smoky air pressing against her chest. Outside, the first light of morning painted the sky pale pink. Elena walked quickly, as though running from her own shadow. She had nothing left, no winnings, no money, only the same bills waiting at home. Her phone buzzed. Another message from the payday lender. "Your payment is overdue. Final escalation pending." She wanted to throw the phone into the gutter. Instead, she shoved it into her pocket and kept walking. By the time she reached her apartment, the city was waking. She collapsed onto the couch, scrubs still draped there like the ghost of her double life. She closed her eyes, but instead of rest, her mind replayed the night. The faces of the men at the table, the smirk of the man with gold rings, the feel of cards against her palm. Then her thoughts circled back to the clinic. To Klein, his voice low and deliberate. "Make sure your outside life doesn't interfere." How much did he know? The question gnawed at her, sharper than debt collectors or empty bank accounts. Elena pressed her palms against her temples, as if she could squeeze the thought away. But it clung stubbornly, whispering that her secret life wasn't as hidden as she believed. She sat there, trembling, as daylight flooded the room, unaware that the man who signed her paychecks was already sharpening the trap he planned to set. By Monday morning, Elena's body still ached from the sleepless night at the tables. Her eyes burned, her stomach churned, and yet the clinic demanded perfection. The sterile corridors echoed with the beeping of machines and the shuffle of patients, each sound sharper than usual, as though the walls themselves judged her. She slipped into her station, smoothing her scrubs, willing herself to appear composed. But inside, shame gnawed at her like an infection. She knew her colleagues noticed the trembling hands, the distracted stares. What if Klein had noticed too? The thought became reality faster than she imagined. Elena, Dr. Marcus Klein's voice cut through the hallway chatter. His tone was smooth, almost pleasant, but it carried the weight of command. A word in my office. Her stomach dropped. She nodded, following him past curious glances from other nurses. His office door shut with a heavy click, sealing her inside. The room smelled of leather and antiseptic, a strange mix of wealth and sterility. Klein leaned against his desk, arms folded, eyes fixed on her. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with hair meticulously slicked back. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You've been distracted lately," he began. His voice was soft, but every syllable pressed down on her chest. "Mistakes on charts, slow responses to calls. That isn't like you." Elena swallowed hard. "I've been tired. Long shifts. You know how it is." Klein tilted his head, studying her like a specimen under glass. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. He placed it on the desk between them, tapping it lightly. "Do you want to know what's inside?" Her throat tightened. "What is it?" "Photographs," he said calmly. "And receipts. From a certain card room downtown. I didn't want to believe it at first, but, well, the evidence speaks for itself." Elena's breath caught. Her knees threatened to give way. How? Did you?" He cut her off with a raised hand. "Don't look so shocked. Miami is a small city when you know where to look, and I like to know everything about the people I trust with my clinic." She stared at the envelope as though it were a weapon. Her secret life, captured in still images, laid bare. All the lies, the excuses, the hidden nights, suddenly stripped of cover. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking. "Don't." Klein smiled faintly, as though savoring her panic. "Relax. I haven't shared this with anyone, yet." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I could report you to the board. You'd lose your license, your career, everything. But I don't want that. I want cooperation." The word landed like poison. "What kind of cooperation?" she asked, though she already dreaded the answer. "You'll help me with a few things," he replied, as if discussing something routine. "Adjusting billing codes, making sure certain patients don't ask questions, covering details that might, let's say, raise eyebrows." Elena shook her head, horrified. "That's fraud. I can't." "You can," Klein interrupted smoothly. "And you will. Or else those photos find their way to the nursing board, your landlord, perhaps even the police." Silence thickened the air. Elena's heart pounded, a drumbeat of dread. She wanted to scream, to storm out, to burn the envelope to ashes. Instead, she found herself whispering, "Why me?" "Because you're smart, and because you're vulnerable." His tone was almost affectionate, which made it all the more chilling. "Think of this as mutually beneficial." Elena's hands curled into fists at her sides. She imagined throwing the envelope in his face, imagined walking out and never looking back. But the images inside chained her tighter than any locked door. Finally, she forced the words past her lips. "I understand." Klein straightened, satisfied. "Good. I knew you'd be reasonable. Let's keep this between us, shall we? I'd hate for anyone else to get the wrong impression about my star nurse." He slid the envelope back into the drawer, the sound of it shutting like a verdict. Then he dismissed her with a nod, as though the conversation had been nothing more than routine supervision. Elena left the office on unsteady legs. The corridor outside seemed brighter, harsher, every fluorescent bulb spotlighting her shame. She walked back to her station, her smile mechanical, her voice hollow as she greeted a patient. Inside, however, something shifted. Fear, yes, but also a quiet spark of anger. Klein had her cornered, but chains could be broken. She just didn't know yet how far she would go. The rest of the week passed like a slow suffocation. Every time Elena walked into the clinic, the air seemed heavier, as though Klein's office door exhaled its secrets into the hallways. She adjusted patient charts, handed out prescriptions, and spoke with families, her smile as practiced as ever. But beneath that surface, she felt the invisible leash Klein had tightened around her neck. Every word he'd said in that office replayed endlessly. Cooperation, vulnerable, mutually beneficial. The first task came sooner than expected. Elena, Klein said one afternoon, sliding a file across the counter toward her. Mr. Alvarez's visit last week. Adjust his billing code. Chronic care management. It'll increase reimbursement. Her hand hovered over the file. But he came in for a simple checkup. Klein's gaze locked onto hers, steady, unyielding. Chronic care. Understood? A silence stretched between them, filled with the distant buzz of fluorescent lights and the faint cough of a patient in the waiting room. Finally, Elena nodded. Understood. Her pen trembled as she altered the record. With one small stroke, she crossed a line she could never uncross. From then on, every task carried the same poison. Adjusted notes, misfiled claims. Patients quietly steered away from questions about costs. Each action stained her hands, but Klein's approving nods told her he was pleased. The clinic's walls began to close in. At night, she wandered the halls. During cleanup, lights dimmed, machines humming softly like restless ghosts. The sterile smell of disinfectant clung to her lungs, choking her. She would pause at the drug cabinet sometimes, staring at the rows of vials and bottles. Her training told her these were tools for healing, but her thoughts whispered darker. Uses. Still, she pushed those whispers away. For now. One evening, after finishing paperwork Klein had forced onto her, she lingered in the break room. Her colleague Rosa entered, cheerful as always, her laughter echoing against the cold tiles. You okay, Elena? You look like you've seen a ghost. Elena forced a smile. Just tired, too many shifts. Rosa chuckled. Tell me about it. Klein's got us all running ragged. Then her expression softened. But you... something's different. If you ever need to talk. Elena's throat tightened. For a moment she wanted to spill everything, to hand the weight over to someone else. But then she pictured the envelope in Klein's drawer, the damning photographs. The words shriveled in her mouth. Thanks, she whispered instead. I'll be fine. That night she dreamed of drowning, the clinic's hallways filled with water, patient files floating past her face, Klein's voice echoing underwater. You're vulnerable. Mutually beneficial. She woke gasping, drenched in sweat, as if the walls of her own apartment had become an extension of the clinic's suffocating grip. Days blurred. Weeks. Klein tightened control in subtle ways, a hand on her shoulder that lingered too long, a comment whispered just close enough for her alone to hear. You're indispensable, Elena. Don't forget that. But it wasn't praise. It was ownership. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror grew stranger each day, eyes hollow, smile brittle. She began to recognize the face of someone she barely knew, someone trapped in a life she hadn't chosen. The more she complied, the more she despised herself. Every signature on a falsified chart felt like another brick in a coffin. Yet refusing Klein meant exposure, disgrace, and ruin. In the sterile glow of the clinic, Elena began to imagine another way. Not escape, not yet, but something final, something that would end the trap once and for all. Her eyes lingered longer, on the locked cabinet where poison sat disguised as medicine. Her hands steadied when she thought about it, not trembling anymore. The whispers in her mind, once fleeting, grew louder, and for the first time Elena didn't push them away. The clinic at night was different. With patients gone and lights dimmed, the sterile corridors whispered instead of bustled. Machines beeped softly in the distance, their rhythms like faint heartbeats pulsing through the walls. Elena lingered after her shift, telling herself she was catching up on paperwork, but her real reason lay deeper, darker. She walked slowly toward the medication storage room. Her badge trembled as she swiped it across the lock, the click echoing louder than it should have. The cabinet door opened with a sigh, revealing rows of neatly labeled vials, glass glinting faintly in the half-light. Elena stood there, frozen. Her training told her what each vial could do: heal, sedate, numb. But her shadowed thoughts whispered what else they could do. In carefully measured doses, They could mimic a heart giving out. They could silence someone without leaving a trace. Her fingertips brushed across a small bottle of digoxin. She knew its power too well. A drug meant to strengthen weak hearts, but lethal in excess. She drew in a shaky breath and pulled her hand back, shoving it deep into her pocket to resist the temptation. "What am I doing?" she whispered to the silence. The answer was obvious. She was planning the unthinkable. Klein's voice still haunted her. "You're vulnerable. Mutually beneficial." His smirk when she obeyed. His shadow growing longer in her life. Each day under his control drained her until only two things remained inside her chest: fear and a seed of rage. She closed the cabinet carefully, locking it again. But the idea had already taken root. She walked down the hallway, her reflection in the darkened windows following her like a stranger she didn't trust. At home later, she couldn't eat. The unopened envelopes on her counter seemed to leer at her, mocking her powerlessness. She poured herself a glass of water, but her hand shook so violently she nearly spilled it. Her mind replayed the vision. Klein clutching his chest, collapsing. The clinic in chaos. She standing over him, not helpless but in control, finally free. Elena pressed her palms into her eyes, forcing the image away. But when she lowered her hands, she realized she wasn't horrified. She was calm. The calm terrified her more than the idea itself. The next morning, her smile at the clinic was flawless. Patients thanked her for her kindness. Colleagues admired her efficiency. But inside, she was rehearsing possibilities. A dose mixed into coffee, a mislabeled syringe, a small injection no one would question. Each option unfolded in her mind like a clinical procedure. She knew the side effects, the timing, the aftermath. Years of training that once promised to save lives now offered her a blueprint for ending one. In the break room, Rosa joked about weekend plans, and Elena laughed on cue. But her eyes kept drifting to the metal cabinet down the hall. A locked door had never felt so alive with possibility. That night, as she lay in bed, sleep refused to come. The ceiling above her blurred into shapes that shifted like playing cards. Klein's voice tangled with the laughter of gamblers, the sound of chips sliding across green felt. She clenched her fists. The thought of poison no longer startled her. It soothed her, and though she hadn't yet crossed the line, she knew she was moving closer with every breath. Tomorrow she would see her sister. Maybe confession could anchor her before she drowned. Or maybe it would only show her how far she'd already fallen. Elena hadn't seen her sister in weeks. Distance wasn't measured only in miles anymore, but in silences. Long stretches of time filled with excuses, missed calls, unanswered texts. Yet on Saturday afternoon, she found herself standing outside Lucia's modest Coral Gables apartment, her knuckles hovering uncertainly above the door. For a moment she considered leaving, turning back, swallowing her secrets the way she always had. But the loneliness pressed harder than her shame. She knocked. The door opened quickly, as though Lucia had been waiting. She was the opposite of Elena in nearly every way, younger by 3 years, hair wild and untamed, her laughter once bright enough to fill any room. But today, Lucia's face softened into surprise. "Elena?" Finally. Her voice carried both relief and reproach. "I was starting to think you'd disappeared." Elena tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "Can I come in?" Lucia stepped aside. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and candles, warm in a way Elena's sterile space never was. They sat on the couch, silence thick between them, until Lucia broke it. "You look awful," she said bluntly. "What's going on?" Elena's throat tightened. She'd rehearsed this on the bus ride over, how she would admit just enough without exposing everything. But now, sitting across from her sister, the practiced words dissolved. "I'm in trouble," she began. Lucia leaned forward. "What kind of trouble?" Elena looked down at her hands. The tremor was faint but constant. "There's someone at work, my boss. He knows something about me." And he's using it against me. Lucia's brows furrowed. Using it how? He's making me do things. Things I don't want to do. Things that could get me fired or worse. For a moment, only the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Then Lucia's voice dropped, fierce and protective. If he's harassing you, Elena, we go to the police. We don't let him. No. Elena cut her off, panic rising. We can't. I can't. Why not? Elena swallowed hard. Her secret hovered on her tongue, the addiction she'd guarded like a wound. She wanted to say it, to pour it out and let her sister see the full mess she'd become. But fear clenched her jaw shut. Instead, she whispered, because if I fight him, he'll destroy me. Lucia reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. You're my sister. You don't have to carry this alone. Tell me what he has on you. Elena shook her head, tears burning her eyes. I can't. Not yet. Just trust me. Please. Lucia's grip softened, her eyes filled with worry. Then leave. Quit the clinic. Walk away before this eats you. Alive! Elena laughed bitterly, a sound she barely recognized. And go where? How do I pay rent? What happens when the bills keep coming? Walking away isn't that simple. You're stronger than this, Lucia said firmly. You've always been the strong one. Elena felt something break inside her at those words. Strong? If only her sister knew about the poker rooms, the debts, the nights spent chasing salvation in a deck of cards. If only she knew that Elena wasn't strong. She was drowning, clawing at anything that kept her afloat. She wiped her eyes quickly, forcing composure. I just needed to see you, to remind myself I'm not completely alone. Lucia pulled her into a hug, holding her as if she could shield her from whatever storm loomed. For the first time in months, Elena allowed herself to lean into it, to feel her sister's steady heartbeat against her own frantic one. But even in that embrace, the thought pressed at her skull like a secret knocking to be let out. Poison, she pictured the vials again, their neat labels hiding silent death, Klein's smirk, his threats, his ownership of her life. And suddenly, she knew her sister's comfort couldn't erase what had already rooted inside her. When she pulled back, Lucia's eyes searched hers. Promise me you won't do anything reckless. Elena forced a nod. I promise. The lie sat heavy in her chest as she rose to leave. On the bus ride back, the city blurred outside the window, bright and indifferent. Elena clenched her bag, on her lap, heart pounding not with fear this time, but with grim resolve. The thought of ending Klein no longer felt like fantasy. It was becoming plan. Elena's hands were steady for the first time in weeks. It surprised her. She had expected trembling, panic, hesitation. But as she stood in the medication storage room late that evening, the quiet hum of the clinic surrounding her, calmness spread through her like a narcotic. The cabinet door clicked open, and rows of vials gleamed under fluorescent light. She had studied them 100 times now, memorized every label, every dosage. Tonight she wasn't just a nurse cataloging supplies. Tonight she was something else entirely. Her fingers closed around the small bottle of digoxin. She lifted it, turning it in the light, the liquid shimmering inside like liquid glass. A drug meant to heal a failing heart, but in the right hands, or the wrong ones, it could stop one cold. Elena slipped the vial into her pocket, her breath slow, controlled. She grabbed a syringe next, sliding it into a sterile wrapper before tucking it away as well. To anyone else, she looked like she was preparing for routine patient care. Only she knew the truth. She returned to the break room, the lights dimmed to a tired yellow glow. The coffee pot gurgled faintly on the counter. She stood there, imagining Klein pouring himself a cup as he often did between appointments, that arrogant smirk tugging at his mouth. She could add a drop, maybe two, let the poison travel quietly through his veins. But the image didn't feel right, too messy, too unpredictable. She needed certainty. Her mind calculated with clinical precision. Digoxin could mimic a natural cardiac event, a sudden collapse during rounds, chaos, confusion, and she, the loyal nurse, rushing to his side, trying to save him. Playing her part to perfection. A sound behind her made her jump. She turned quickly, only Rosa laughing with another nurse as they passed by the hall. Elena forced a smile and nodded, her heart hammering until they were gone. She clutched the pocket of her scrubs, reassured by the weight of the vial. She whispered under her breath, "Not yet. Soon." At home later that night, she cleared the clutter off her kitchen table. Bills and unopened envelopes slid to the floor. She placed the vial carefully on the wood, the syringe beside it. The sight was both terrifying and intoxicating. Her hands moved with practiced ritual: alcohol swab, cotton pad, careful measurement of the dose. The plunger slid smoothly as liquid filled the syringe. She held it up to the light, tapping until a perfect droplet formed at the tip. This was her craft, the skill that had saved lives for years. Now it was inverted, corrupted, sharpened into a weapon. Elena set the syringe down, staring at it as though it were a mirror. She whispered, "This is how it ends." The apartment was silent except for her breathing. For a fleeting moment, doubt clawed at her. She saw her sister's face, the hug that had almost undone her resolve. She heard Lucia's voice, "Promise me you won't do anything reckless." Her chest tightened. Maybe she should stop. Maybe there was still a way out. But then Klein's voice overpowered it, silky and smug. "You're vulnerable. Mutually beneficial." She saw his smirk, felt the weight of the envelope in his drawer, the invisible leash around her neck. Rage flared hot enough to burn away hesitation. She capped the syringe, wrapped it in sterile packaging, and placed it back in her bag, alongside the vial. Tomorrow, it would be ready. Tomorrow, she would be ready. Elena sat back, exhausted but strangely light. For the first time in months, the bills on the floor, the gambling debts, the sleepless nights, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the plan. She imagined Klein's face when it happened, the sudden shock, the collapse. She would kneel beside him, feigning horror, hands pressing against his chest in futile compressions. The clinic would scream around her, but she would be calm, in control, finally free. The thought didn't frighten her anymore. It comforted her. She turned off the lights, leaving the kitchen in darkness, the syringe hidden but not forgotten. As she lay down in bed, sleep came quickly for the first time in weeks. Morning would bring chaos. Morning would bring justice. Her justice, and she was ready to deliver the dose. The clinic was already humming when Elena arrived, the air thick with chatter and the sterile tang of disinfectant. She moved through the motions with mechanical grace, greeting patients, checking vitals, filing notes. No one saw the weight in her bag, the sterile packet hidden beneath harmless supplies. Klein's voice carried from down the hall, confident, authoritative. He strode past her station, his cologne sharp, his eyes flicking over her with that familiar mixture of scrutiny and ownership. Elena forced a polite smile. Inside, her heart raced with the rhythm of a drumbeat. The syringe was ready. The vial had been carefully returned, the evidence erased. What remained now was opportunity. It came sooner than she expected. Klein poured himself coffee in the break room, leaning casually against the counter as he reviewed a chart. Elena entered, her expression perfectly neutral. The syringe pressed cold against her side through the fabric of her bag. "You're early today," Klein remarked without looking up. "Trying to stay ahead," she replied, her voice steady.